The flames rose high above the silver towers of the Valorian capital, turning the sky into a deep red haze. Smoke drifted over the streets like dark clouds that had fallen from the heavens. People ran in every direction, holding children, dragging wounded friends, calling out names that were lost in the noise. The great city that once shined like a jewel was now breaking apart piece by piece. Queen Seraida stood on the highest balcony of her palace and watched everything she had worked for collapse. Her tall crown felt heavy on her head, and her silver armor carried scratches from battles she had fought only hours earlier. Her blue eyes, usually calm, showed fear she never let others see. She had fought for days without rest. She had used every ship, every shield, every soldier. But nothing had stopped the enemy machines. They came from the Krail Dominion, a violent empire that wanted control of every world in the region. Their machines walked like metal giants, and their weapons could cut through buildings with a single blast. Now these machines marched down the main road, pushing through the last defense lines. The final energy shield flickered like a dying flame, then vanished, making everyone freeze in fear. Seraida felt her heart sink. Without that shield, nothing stood between the enemy and the palace. She touched the railing and whispered to herself even though no one could hear, "Not yet. Not today." Her advisors shouted behind her, begging her to escape. They said the fight was lost. They said she had to save herself so the Valorians could one day rise again. But Seraida refused. She could not leave her people. A true queen stayed until the very end, even if that end came with fire. Down in the city plaza, a sea of frightened civilians rushed past the palace gates. Among them moved a human man named Davin Hale. No one paid attention to him. He did not wear armor or carry a weapon. His travel cloak was covered in dust from long journeys. He looked like someone who had come to the wrong place at the wrong time. His dark hair was messy, his boots were old, and his face showed a calm expression that did not match the chaos around him. But his eyes, those were different. They were sharp, watching everything, noticing every movement, every threat. He stood still while the crowd ran, as if he was searching for something he had already chosen. A loud crash shook the ground. One of the enemy machines fired a heavy blast toward the palace balcony. The white stone cracked as the energy bolt flew toward the queen. Her guards shouted and tried to pull her back, but the blast came too fast. Seraida closed her eyes. The explosion never hit her. When she opened her eyes again, she saw something impossible. A human figure stood between her and the explosion. Dusks of smoke drifted around him. Pieces of shattered stone fell behind him. He had placed himself in front of her at the exact moment of impact, his back facing her, his arms braced as if he had taken the shock with his own body. But he stood there, unharmed. Seraida stared, unable to speak. The guards stared too, confused and afraid to move. Davin turned his head slightly, just enough to look at the queen. His voice was calm, almost quiet. "You should step back, Your Majesty." The queen heard the tone. It was not arrogant. It was not commanding. It was simply a warning, spoken by someone who understood danger deeply. "Who are you?" she whispered. He did not answer. He stepped forward, preparing for the next attack. Below them the crowd stopped running. People turned. They had seen what happened. A human, one of the weakest species in the galaxy, had stood in front of a palace blast and survived. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Did he stop that?" "How?" Another voice said, "No human can do that." The shock spread like a wave. Even the enemy machine paused for a moment, confused by the lack of damage. Seraida walked down from the balcony, followed by her guards, and approached the edge of the steps. She could see Davin clearly now. His calm expression had changed into something colder, something focused, as if he had entered a state of mind where fear could not reach him. Another blast shot toward the palace. The guards raised shields, but Davin moved faster. He stepped forward and pushed the guards aside, then raised his arm. The energy hit something invisible around him and scattered like sparks. The crowd gasped. Seraida felt her breath catch in her throat. This was not technology. This was not armor. It was something else. The machine reloaded its weapon and aimed again. Davin narrowed his eyes. He studied the aim, the timing, the movement of the barrel. Then with one deep breath he sprinted forward. His speed made people blink in disbelief. He leaped onto the broken stairs, ran straight toward the machine, and jumped high enough to reach its metal head. Seraida had never seen anyone move like that. He struck the machine with a controlled strike that sent a crack through its armored shell. The machine staggered. His second strike made it fall to its knees. The third strike broke the machine's power core, making it collapse completely. Silence filled the plaza. The crowd stared. Sarita stared. No human should have that kind of strength. No human should move like that. No human should have survived those blasts. Davin stepped away from the fallen machine, breathing slowly as if this was something he had done before. But his face held no pride. No excitement. Only focus. Sarita walked toward him, her steps slow, her eyes never leaving him. When she reached him, she spoke in a quiet voice. "You are not a normal human," she said. He looked at her for a moment, then lowered his gaze. "I never said I was." Behind them, the enemy army began to adjust their march, now targeting the palace more aggressively. Sarita turned to face the battlefield again. The danger was still there. The war was still far from over. But something had changed. A human had stood between her and death. A human had broken an enemy machine with his bare hands. A human had given her people a small spark of hope in the darkest moment. And Sarita knew that the war might not be over, not if Davin Hale chose to stand with them. "Stay with me," she said softly. "I need your help." Davin nodded once. "Then I will help." The flames still burned. The city still fell apart. But standing beside the queen was someone who should not matter, yet suddenly mattered more than anyone. The palace halls shook as distant explosions echoed through the city. Queen Sarita moved quickly through the long corridor, her guards forming a circle around her and the human who had just saved her life. Davin walked silently beside them, calm and steady, as if the burning capital outside was only a small disturbance. Sarita kept glancing at him. She could not stop herself. She had seen brave soldiers. She had seen powerful warriors. But she had never seen anyone stand in front of an enemy blast with nothing but their body and survive without a single wound. Her advisors rushed toward her when she entered the command chamber. The room was filled with glowing screens, maps of the city, communication tables, and alarm lights flashing red. Officers shouted orders, trying to control what little remained of their army. "Your Majesty, the outer walls are completely gone," General Keth said. "We must evacuate you now." Sarita raised her hand. "Not yet." "Not yet," the general repeated in disbelief. Then he noticed Davin. "Who is this? Where did he come from?" Sarita did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned to the table where incoming reports flickered. She needed information. She needed a plan. But her mind kept returning to the moment Davin stood between her and the blast like a walking shield. She looked at him now. His clothes were torn from the explosion, but his body held no burns, no cuts, no signs of injury. He stood tall and quiet, waiting, not trying to explain himself. Sarita spoke softly. "We need to know who he is." Her officers nodded and activated the identity scanner. The blue light swept across Davin's face, reading his bones, his eyes, everything about him. A few seconds later, the results appeared on the main screen. Everyone froze. "No match," the officer whispered. Sarita frowned. "Run it again." They scanned him again. "No match in planetary records." Sarita's voice became sharper. "Search the wider star network." They expanded the search. "No match in any human colony, no match in any migration log, no match in military lists, no match in medical lists, nothing." The silence grew heavier. General Keth looked at Davin with suspicion. "Are you using some type of countersignal to hide your identity?" Davin shook his head. "No." "Then why is there no record of you anywhere?" the general demanded. Davin's voice was calm. "Because I never stayed anywhere long enough to be recorded." Sarita felt something shift inside her. She did not know if he was telling the full truth, but she could sense he was not lying either. His tone was too steady, too honest. "Where are you from?" Sarita asked gently. Davin's eyes flickered for a moment. It was the first sign of hesitation she had seen from him. "A small place," he said. "A place that doesn't matter anymore." "That is not an answer," General Keth said. Davin did not reply. Sarita stepped closer to him. "You saved my life. You saved dozens of people in the plaza. I want to trust you. But I must know something. Anything. Why are you here?" He slowly looked up at her. His eyes were dark, but there was a strange sadness deep inside them. "I go where I'm needed," he said simply. Sarita felt the weight of his words. It was said with calmness but also with a kind of pain. As if he had lost something long ago, and had been walking ever since. Before she could ask anything more, an officer shouted from the table, "Your Majesty! Enemy forces are closing in on the central sector. We have 15 minutes before they reach the palace walls." General Keth turned sharply. "We need to take the queen to the bunker now." Sarita remained still. "No. We hold the palace for as long as we can. The general tried to argue, but Sarita's look stopped him instantly. She turned to Davin again. You said you go where you're needed. Are you willing to help us hold the palace? Davin nodded once. Yes. Then we stand together, she said. Her officers exchanged worried looks. Trusting a man with no identity in the middle of a war seemed dangerous. But Sarita felt something they did not. She saw how Davin reacted under fire. She saw how he moved. She saw how he looked at the people running for safety. His instincts were not hostile. They were protective. General Keth cleared his throat. If he fights with us, we need to understand his abilities. Sarita looked at Davin. How did you withstand that blast? Davin lowered his eyes. Humans can survive more than most people think. We push ourselves when we have to. That was not normal, the general insisted. What you did was impossible, an officer said under her breath. Davin stayed silent. Sarita watched him carefully. She realized something important. He was not hiding because he wanted to be mysterious. He was hiding because something in his past hurt him deeply. Something he refused to bring back. But now he stood here, offering his strength to a world that was not his own. She nodded once. Very well. An alarm blared. The palace shutters shook as enemy machines approached, their heavy steps shaking the ground. The officers prepared defensive lines. Soldiers ran to the upper floors. Weapons charged with blue light. Sarita stepped onto the balcony again. Davin stood behind her, watching the advancing machines. There were dozens of them, maybe more. Their tall frames glowed with red symbols, and their weapons hummed with deadly power. Sarita looked at Davin. If you have any reason to fight, any purpose, now is the time. Davin did not look at her. His eyes were locked on the battlefield. I don't fight for a purpose, he said quietly. I fight because someone must. Sarita felt a chill run through her. She saw no pride in him, no anger, no desire for glory. Only a simple truth. A truth that made him different from anyone she had ever met. The ground shook harder. The machines raised their weapons. Sarita's guards took fighting positions. Davin stepped forward. Sarita reached out instinctively. Davin. He only said one thing before the battle began. I'll give you time. Then he leapt over the balcony railing with unnatural speed, dropping down into the courtyard as the first explosion lit up the night sky. Sarita watched in shock as he sprinted straight toward the enemy machines, alone, fearless, and impossibly fast. A human, someone with no name, no past, no records, had chosen to stand for a world that was not his. And for the first time since the war began, Sarita felt something rise inside her chest. Oh. The night sky lit up with blue and red flashes as the enemy machines fired again and again. The ground shook like a drum under their weight. Dust rose with every blast, covering the palace courtyard in a thick gray cloud. Soldiers on the walls watched in fear, unable to understand why one man, a human, had rushed forward alone. Davin ran straight at the advancing line of metal giants. He moved so fast that the machines had trouble locking onto him. Each time a weapon fired, he shifted direction by only an inch, but it was always the right inch. The blast hit the ground behind him, carving deep holes in the stone. Queen Sarita watched from the balcony, her hands tight around the railing. She could not look away. She had seen brave warriors before, but not like this. Davin's movements were not normal. His speed, his timing, his focus, it all felt unnatural, something far beyond what a human should be able to do. One machine finally cornered him and fired at close range. The explosion covered everything in smoke. Sarita gasped. Soldiers shouted. For a moment, everyone believed Davin had been destroyed. Then the smoke cleared. He was standing there, one hand raised, the blast having hit something invisible again. Not a shield. Not armor. Something else. Sarita whispered, "How is that possible?" Davin did not wait. He jumped forward and landed on the machine's arm. His boots dug into the metal like he weighed nothing. With one sharp movement, he struck the machine's weapon joint. Sparks flew out, and the machine's gun fell uselessly to its side. The machine tried to grab him, but Davin moved again. He jumped to the head of the machine and drove his fist straight through the armor. The machine collapsed in seconds. The soldiers watching from the walls broke into shocked whispers. No human is that strong. He punched through steel. Is he even human? But Sarita's voice cut through their panic. He is human. I know it. There is something special in him, but he is human. She did not know why she believed that so strongly. But she felt it every time she looked at him. Davin landed on the ground just as another machine fired at him from the right. Instead of dodging, he ran straight at it. He slid under the machine's legs, grabbed its joint plates and tore out an important piece of wiring. The machine collapsed backward, crashing into another one behind it. 2 enemy units down. He kept going. A group of machines surrounded him and fired together. The courtyard filled with bright explosions. The palace shook. Several soldiers covered their faces, unable to watch. Sarita forced herself not to blink. When the fire faded, Davin stepped out of the smoke again. His clothes were burned and dirty, but his body was not. He breathed slowly as if he was used to surviving things that should kill him. This time the machines reacted with caution. They moved back slightly, scanning him, trying to understand what they were fighting. Davin tilted his head like he understood their confusion. Then he ran at them again. Sarita turned to her generals. Send our forces to the lower wall. Support him with fire. If he falls, the palace falls. General Keth nodded and shouted orders. Valorian soldiers took positions and fired energy bolts at the enemy machines, giving Davin openings. He used every opening perfectly. He moved through the battlefield like he saw the future a few seconds before it happened. One machine tried to crush him with a heavy foot. Davin grabbed a broken metal beam from the ground and used it like a lever. He pushed with a strength no one should have, throwing the huge machine sideways. Sarita stared with wide eyes. She had seen entire squads struggle against one machine, yet Davin fought 10 without fear. Still, something felt wrong. He moved like someone who had fought battles alone for a long time. He reacted to attacks with instinct, not strategy. A lonely kind of experience. A painful kind of experience. He fought like someone who expected no one to help him. As more machines tried to surround him again, something changed. They began focusing all fire on him, ignoring the palace walls. Their red eyes glowed brighter, their aim more precise. Sarita felt her heart tighten. They're learning. They're adapting to him. General Keth nodded in fear. If they target only him, he won't survive. Sarita shook her head. He will survive. But he cannot win alone. She raised her voice so the soldiers could hear. Cover him. Do not let the enemy corner him. The Valorian forces fired everything they had. Energy blasts hit the machines, slowing them down. Davin used the distraction to climb onto the largest machine. He reached the top in seconds and slammed his fist into the control core. The machine exploded. Davin jumped off, landing hard but steady on the ground. For the first time since the war began, cheers rose from the Valorians. Soldiers shouted his name even though they had learned it only minutes ago. Davin. Human warrior. Fight with us. Davin did not react to the cheers. He simply kept moving toward the next machine. His face stayed calm, but his eyes held something else. Old pain. A memory he didn't want. Sarita felt it again, that strange sadness inside him. She did not know what had shaped him, but it was something powerful. Something that turned a man into a weapon. As the last machine in the first wave collapsed, Davin stopped fighting. He breathed slowly, looking over the battlefield. The courtyard was filled with broken metal parts, sparks, and smoke. The enemy forces stopped advancing, confused and waiting for new orders. Sarita stepped down from the balcony and walked toward him. Her guards tried to follow, but she raised her hand. Let me go. She walked across the broken stones until she reached him. Davin turned to face her, his eyes steady and calm again. You fought alone against an entire unit, she said softly. No human should be able to do that. Davin did not answer. Sarita stepped closer. But you did. Still he stayed quiet. Not cold. Not distant. Just silent. You saved my people, she said, her voice gentler now. You gave us hope when we had none. They are cheering for you. Davin looked away. I didn't fight for that. Then why? Sarita asked. He looked back at her. For a moment she saw a glimmer of truth in his eyes, something heavy, something painful. I fight because someone has to stand between danger and the innocent, he said. That's all. Sarita felt those words hit something deep inside her. The battlefield lights flickered. A new alarm sounded. The enemy machines were gathering again, preparing for a second wave. But the soldiers no longer looked terrified. They looked ready. Because they had seen something impossible. A human who fought like a legend. A human who made machines fear him. A human who gave them a reason to believe the war was not lost. Sarita placed her hand gently on Davin's arm. We stand together now. Not you alone. Davin nodded slowly. The second wave was coming. And this time, Davin would not be facing it alone. The second wave of machines marched forward with a colder, sharper precision. Their red lights glowed brighter, scanning every corner of the palace courtyard. They had learned from the first battle. They had seen Davin fight. And now they moved with one clear goal: destroy the human before he could strike again. Davin stood still at the center of the broken battlefield. Smoke curled around him like a dark fog. His clothes were torn, his face covered in dust, but his eyes stayed sharp. He watched the machines move into formation. He understood their new pattern instantly. They changed their strategy, he said quietly. Queen Seraida stood beside him, surrounded by her guards. They fear you. They fear what they don't understand, Davin replied. Seraida turned to her soldiers now gathering behind her. Their armor glowed with blue light. Their weapons hummed with power. They looked stronger than before. Hope made them stronger. General Keth shouted orders. Positions. Prepare for coordinated fire. We do not break formation this time. Seraida looked at Davin. This time we fight as one. Davin nodded once. But inside he felt something tight in his chest. He was not used to fighting with others. He was used to facing danger alone. He did not know if he could protect all these people. But he would try. The machines stopped at the far end of the courtyard. In the center stood a taller one, marked with bright crimson symbols, a commander unit. Its voice echoed through the battlefield, cold and metallic. Human combatant identified. Priority target. Seraida stepped in front of Davin. You will not take him. The machine scanned her. Secondary target. Davin pulled her gently back. Stay behind the soldiers. Seraida wanted to argue, but the way he said it left her no choice. The crimson machine raised its weapon. All the others followed. Davin whispered, "Here it comes." The courtyard exploded with light. Energy blasts rained down. The palace walls shook. Dust filled the air. Soldiers raised shields. Davin moved instantly, grabbing a fallen metal plate and using it to deflect 2 blasts before leaping into the air. He landed on the shoulder of the nearest machine and drove his fist through its head. Sparks burst out. The machine collapsed. The soldiers cheered and fired back. Blue beams shot across the field, hitting the machines and staggering their movements. Davin darted between them, using every opening the soldiers created. The battle became a storm of noise and motion. Davin kicked off a fallen piece of stone and flipped behind another machine. He ripped out its core cable. It collapsed. A machine aimed at Seraida, who stood with her guards on the balcony steps. Davin saw it instantly. He ran across the courtyard so fast he left a streak of dust behind him. He reached Seraida just in time, pulling her aside before the blast hit the stairway. The explosion threw them both back, but Davin shielded her with his body. Seraida gasped, looking at him. "Why are you risking yourself like this?" He stood up slowly. "Because I can take it. You can't." She felt her heart twist at his words. He spoke like someone who had spent his whole life taking hits meant for others. The machines changed strategy again. They spread out, surrounding Davin from all sides. Their red sensors locked on him with perfect accuracy. Davin narrowed his eyes. They're adapting faster. General Keth shouted from behind the lines, "Fall back. We cannot protect you if they close in." But Davin did not fall back. Instead he stepped forward. Seraida felt panic rise in her chest. "Davin, stop." He shook his head. "If I retreat they'll break through. They're not after just me now. They want the whole city." Seraida stepped toward him. For the first time her voice trembled. "Then let us fight together. Don't carry it all alone." Davin looked at her with quiet eyes. Something in her tone reached him. Something he had not felt in a long time. "Trust. Then stay close," he said softly. The machines fired again. Davin grabbed Seraida and leapt behind a fallen barrier. Soldiers returned fire, trying to keep the machines from closing in. Energy blasts bounced off Davin's improvised shield as he protected the queen. He could feel the pressure building. The machines were targeting him with smarter patterns now, predicting his movements. Davin's body vibrated with strain. Even he had limits. But then something changed. A Valorian soldier ran forward, shouting, "For the queen!" Another followed. Then another. Soon an entire squad charged ahead, firing and pushing the machines back. Davin stared for a moment, surprised. Seraida smiled. "You gave them courage. Now they're giving it back." Davin stood up beside her. "Then let's finish this." They pushed forward together. Seraida fought with the soldiers, her blade glowing with blue energy. Davin fought beside them, breaking machines apart with impossible strength. The enemy formation struggled to keep up. Their perfect lines broke. Their focus spread. Their strategy crumbled. Davin leapt at the Crimson Commander machine. It raised a massive arm and swung at him. Davin blocked it with both hands, but the impact forced him back. Sarita saw it and ran toward them. She fired her weapon, hitting the machine's arm joint and causing it to freeze for a second. "That's your opening," she shouted. Davin jumped onto the machine's chest and slammed both fists into its core. The impact sent a shockwave through the courtyard. The red lights on the commander flickered, then went dark. The machine fell backward and crashed into the stone. Silence fell. The remaining machines, now without their commander unit, shut down and collapsed one by one. The battlefield finally stopped shaking. The soldiers stared in disbelief. We won. Is it over?" Sarita stood in the middle of the courtyard, dust swirling around her. Davin stood beside her, breathing deeply but still steady. The soldiers began cheering. Loud, powerful, hopeful. They shouted Sarita's name. Then they shouted Davin's. The queen turned to him. "This was the turning point," she said softly. "They thought the war was already decided. But you changed everything." Davin looked at the fallen machines. "The war isn't over yet. But today," Sarita said, "you showed them something they never expected." Davin looked at her quietly. "You showed them what a human can do when he refuses to fall." For the first time, Davin allowed a small, tired smile. Not because he wanted praise, but because, for the first time in a long time, he did not feel like he was fighting alone. And the soldiers around them, those who had once believed everything was lost, now stood stronger than ever. Because hope had returned. And it came from the last person anyone expected. A human. The alarms of the royal city were finally quiet, but the silence that followed felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Queen Lyrana stood on the highest balcony of her palace, looking down at the thousands of people gathered in the open courtyard. Their faces were tired, bruised, dirty, but for the first time in many cycles, they were hopeful. And they were hopeful because of one human. Rowan stood beside her, still wearing the same simple clothes he had been wearing when he first stepped into her war room. They were torn from battle and covered in dust, but he looked calm. The wind blew through his dark hair as he scanned the horizon like a soldier who had done this 1,000 times, even though he had no history, no records, and no explanation. Lyrana knew that every pair of eyes, from guards to children, was studying him. Some admired him. Some feared him. Others simply did not understand. But they all knew he was the one who changed everything. The enemy fleet that once covered the sky was gone. The invaders who once marched through their cities had retreated in panic. All because Rowan had stepped forward at the moment when the queen had lost all hope. All because Rowan had a power no one understood, not even himself. Now the world waited for what would come next. Lyrana stepped forward and raised her hand. The crowd grew quiet. Her voice carried across the open field. "Today we stand because of courage," she said softly. "Courage from our soldiers, courage from our people, and courage from someone who did not even belong to our world, yet chose to save it." The crowd shifted, everyone turning their eyes toward Rowan. He looked uncomfortable, almost shy, as if he did not know how to accept so much attention. He had stood against machines that could destroy mountains, but public praise clearly felt far more dangerous. Lyrana continued. "We have survived a war we could not win. But victory is only the first step. Now we must choose our future. We cannot remain alone. We cannot fear what is different. We cannot push away those who reach out to help." She looked directly at Rowan. "We must change. And it starts with the alliance we formed today." Rowan blinked, surprised. He had expected thanks. He had expected questions. But an alliance? That was something far bigger. Lyrana turned back to the crowd. Her voice grew stronger. "I, Lyrana, Queen of Athalara, declare the first alliance between our world and Earth. We will share knowledge, we will share strength, and we will share trust. For trust is what saved us." A wave of murmurs moved through the courtyard. Some people were confused. Some excited. Others still afraid. But no one opposed. Then Lyrana stepped closer to Rowan and spoke quietly so only he could hear. "You changed the fate of my people. I want our worlds to walk the same path. Together." Rowan took a breath, steady and calm. "I came here by accident," he said softly. "But I stayed because your people looked like they needed someone. On my world, humans have a rule. You help when someone needs you." Lyrana smiled gently. "Then help us build something new." He gave a small nod. "I will." Below them, the crowd erupted into cheers. It wasn't loud at first, but it grew slowly, spreading through the courtyard like a sunrise spreading across a dark horizon. For the first time in a long time, their cheers were not forced, not desperate, not full of fear. They were full of hope. But Lyrana knew the truth. An alliance with Earth would bring challenges. Questions. Fears. There were still enemies who would not accept defeat. There were still mysteries behind Rowan's power. There was still a universe full of danger waiting in the dark. Yet none of it scared her now. Not when she had seen what a single human could do. After the cheering calmed, Rowan and Lyrana descended the long stairs that led into the courtyard. People reached out to touch Rowan's arm or shoulder as he passed. Some whispered blessings. Others simply stared as if they were looking at a legend. A small child approached him, no older than 7, with wide eyes and trembling hands. "Are you going to protect us now?" the child asked. Rowan knelt so they were at the same level. He gave the child a warm smile. "I'll protect anyone who needs me," he said simply. The child smiled back, then ran into the crowd. Lyrana watched Rowan stand again. He didn't look like a warrior, not in his worn clothes and quiet expression. But she knew better. Humans did not need armor to be powerful. They did not need records to be important. They did not need royal blood to change the fate of a world. Sometimes all they needed was the courage to take one step forward. As the sun set behind the ruins of the battlefield, Rowan and Lyrana stood together at the edge of the courtyard. The sky was calm for the first time in many cycles. "It's beautiful," Rowan said. Lyrana nodded. "And it's the beginning." He glanced at her. "The beginning of what?" She smiled. "The beginning of two worlds choosing to trust each other." Rowan looked out at the sky again. "Then I'm ready." And so, with a human and a queen standing side by side, two worlds began a new path, one shaped not by war but by courage, trust, and the hope of something greater. A new alliance that would change the galaxy forever.